asked questions, and the questions will be projected on the screens. And then each panelist will have about 3 minutes or so to answer the question, and then other panelists can pitch in. So on the panel we have Imam Omar Suleiman, and we also have Sister Suzy Ismail, and we also have Sister Amena Iqbal. So the first question that we have is for Sister Suzy Ismail. And the question is, the first pillar of Islam, Tawheed, is generally taken as just a recitation of the kalima, La ilaha illallah, and that's it. How is Tawheed depicted in one's life, lifestyle, actions, and the way of thinking?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم. So I'm sure you've all been to many inspirational sessions so far. You've been taking lots of notes. And I think this is, I was told this is one of those secret sessions that was kind of circulated around on social media, Facebook, Twitter. And that's always a nice thing to know that there's that group of people who can be targeted through the social media avenues to come to a program that's specifically tailored to answer your questions. So the question that I was given about Tawheed, this first question, is an incredibly important one because Tawheed is what we build our entire faith upon. That kalama la ilaha illallah, although it is translated as simply meaning there is no God but Allah, there's so much more behind the concept of Tawheed and living Tawheed. At the time of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, he was fighting against real idols. He had to break down statues to try to convey the concept of Tawheed to his people. And today, sometimes we think that we don't have this problem because we don't have the idols, the statues at the time that Sayyidina Ibrahim had. But we have a different kind of idol worshipping that's going on. And it's the idol worshipping that's spelled I-D-L-E. The worshipping of all things that are idle, that take up our time, that occupy our minds, that occupy our hearts, and that pull us away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So even though we may not be standing up and making sujood to an actual statue, so many of us, when we hear the adhan, for example, and we're on Facebook and we're scrolling down and posting and reading things, or we're surfing the net, or we're gaming, or playing Call of Duty or World of Warcraft or whatever is popular these days, and we hear that adhan and we think to ourselves, I'll pray later. I'll take care of it in a little bit. That's okay, I have time. The idol activity is pulling us away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we do stand in our salah, when we do stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we raise our hands up and we say Allahu Akbar, are we truly believing with our hearts not only that God is great, but Allahu Akbar, God is greater than? And when we raise our hands and we say God is greater than, Allahu Akbar, what are we saying He's greater than? Everything that we've put behind us. So that action of raising our hands, that action where we're truly committing to the concept of Tawheed, of La ilaha illallah, requires us to give with our heart as well that commitment and that connection of putting the dunya behind us. And that's true Tawheed. And we can integrate it in our lives in everything we do when we recognize that everything we do in this dunya can serve as a form of ibadah, can serve as a form of worship if we do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I know there's many other important questions that we want to get to, so I'll wrap it up here. But I would definitely say that the concept of Tawheed goes way beyond just saying La ilaha illallah. It's a matter of practicing it and pushing away everything else that could be considered shirk with the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Jazakallah khair. So the next question we have is for Sister Amena Iqbal. And this question is, why are youth leaving Islam? So what are some of the things that are causing youth to leave Islam?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Well, clearly there are many, many reasons why youth are unfortunately leaving the fold of Islam. I personally feel, just from the people I've been exposed to and people I've heard about as well, that there really aren't enough real-life examples for them that have allowed them to stick to the deen. There aren't enough motivators for them, and they've obviously struggled between the challenges that they've seen, come across their lifetime in this dunya. Obviously, the things that they've surrounded themselves with seemed more attractive to them than what our deen encompasses and can offer. And us as youth, I feel like this is definitely something that we can take away from avoiding so many youth leaving Islam, is that us as youth and people who are part of this generation, we should take it upon ourselves to actually become ambassadors of our deen, to be able to invite and remind those that are around us about how beautiful the deen is. Because honestly, at the end of the day, they're not going to listen to the older generation. They will most likely find a connection with us, and we have to become people that can influence and be an inspiration to such people, especially the youth that are having issues and having a problem understanding what Islam is all about. It won't be easy, obviously, for all of us to welcome them and to invite them to, for example, the halakas that we might go to, or to our own homes, and just become their friends. It'll be a hard road. I've personally had to deal with this myself. But the most important thing is that we have to try to leave an impression with them. And we have to be people that show that we are concerned and that we do genuinely and sincerely care for them. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make the youth the leaders of this ummah, and make us all role models for the rest of the people who have problems right now.
Jazakallah khair. Also, the other panelists as well can pitch in at any time. Just wanted to make a quick announcement for the YM sisters. The raffle is going to end at 3 p.m. So if you haven't taken part in the raffle, please go to the YM sisters booth. And the winner of the raffle will be announced at main session 4, inshallah. So next question we have is for Sheikh Omar Suleiman. And this question is, how can you prove logically and know for certain that Islam is the true deen?
Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulih al-kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. What do you guys think? How do you prove Islam is how do you prove Islam logically is the true religion? I'm asking you guys, I'm serious. It said ask YC, not ask YC speakers. How do you know Islam is true? Yeah. You what? Prove the existence of God. Why he has to be one? Okay. Okay, revelation, prophets. And that's it. Okay. Anyone else? Any sisters? Yeah. This, did you say science related? Okay, so the science related, like miracles of the Quran, the scientific miracles of the Quran, things of that sort. The only point that I wanted to make, obviously, with asking is that people will have different answers. There are certain things that resonate with certain people. Everyone has things that resonate with them. And the beauty of Islam is that it appeals to people's intellect in many different ways. So if you study, and I went through this period where I had to logically be convinced that Islam was the true religion. I really did have issues, and I had to go through this as a teenager. And subhanAllah, when I studied the rest of the religions, and part of it is process of elimination. I have to be very, very, very clear. Part of it is process of elimination. I was like, okay, well, none of this makes sense whatsoever. Okay? And then I narrowed it down to monotheistic faith, because I do think that, number one, because I think the question said no emotional stuff as well. number one, we do believe in a concept of fitrah. We do believe in a concept of a natural disposition towards God and the belief of God. And as I said last night in the session, that there is no such thing as a true atheist in the true sense of the word. They don't exist. Everyone believes in God. It's inside of them. If you put an atheist on a lie detector, they will fail. They have failed in every single study that's been done. They failed that test. People do believe in God. So for me, it was, okay, I believe in a God, but how do I know that Islam is the religion of truth? So I'll just tell you the journey I went through. I studied every single religion out there. I mean, I even studied Jainism. That's how deep I went into Eastern religions and comparative religions. Studied and it was through process of elimination. I said, all right, it has to be monotheistic. This stuff about divine realities that manifest themselves in idols or in other things, and I don't want to be disrespectful. It's not from our religion to be disrespectful towards other religions. It just didn't make sense to me. Wild polytheism did not make sense to me. Then I narrowed it down to monotheistic faiths. I studied Judaism, and I realized that from an Orthodox perspective, Judaism, you cannot be a Jew unless your mother is a Jew. So actually that's the entire reason for the birth of the Reform movement, which is that that you can actually convert to Judaism through the Reform tradition, which doesn't include the observing of the Judaic law or anything of that sort. And then when I studied Christianity, and again, there are definitely similarities between Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, but there are very, very, very concerning ties. And if you study comparative religion in college, they'll tell you that modern day Christianity, the founder of modern day Christianity is Paul. It's not Jesus, peace be upon him. It is Paul. Christianity, that's not a Muslim interpretation. That is a scholarly, that is an academic perspective, whether you're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, or atheist. The founder of Christianity as we have it today is Paul. Okay? And there is no doubt that Paul says in Corinthians, I have become all things to all people. That Paul adopted certain things from other religions and other cultures, and it was all incorporated into Christianity. I read the entire Bible. I highlighted everything that resonated and everything that concerned me. And I still have that Bible, by the way. Most Christians haven't read the entire Bible, just like most Muslims haven't read the entire Quran, right? And then I even went to churches, I studied that, and I came to Islam, and subhanAllah, I was so intellectually convinced about Islam from a scientific perspective, from studying the Messenger, peace be upon him, right? Because if the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was out to make money, he had money before the revelation. If he was out to get fame and status, I mean, he went through humiliation after the revelation. He didn't benefit at all from a worldly perspective from his message. And no one would have said anything had he lived in at least a big house, a comfortable house, at least a house the size of the one that he used to live in Mecca before the revelation. But instead, the Prophet ﷺ lived in hujurat that were 9 by 14. You know how small that is? The room of the Prophet ﷺ was tiny. Actually, not 9 by 14, 9 by 4. Okay? Tiny hujurat, long hujurat. And the Prophet ﷺ starved. He had to tie stones to his stomach. So there's no doubt that the man had a deep conviction in his religion, in his message. So I studied the seerah perspective. Then when you study the perspective of the Quran, there is no way. Think about this. The Quran, had it come at one time, then you can make an argument that, maybe the Prophet ﷺ was sitting with the companions and, or some really eloquent people, and they put this all together and then they just revealed it and they said, hey, we've been getting this over time. And the Prophet ﷺ could have claimed that. But the fact that the Prophet ﷺ was receiving revelations on spot about incidents that were taking place with the same perfect grammar, perfect poetic rhythm that the Quran has, with not a single mistake, and you only really recognize that, and that's why I said that it resonates with different people. If you appreciate the Arabic language, you really appreciate the Quran. It's perfection in language and grammar, prediction of future events, the revelation of Surah Rum, for example, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the Surah Rum, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, غُلِبَتِ الرُّومُ في أدنى الأرض وهم من بعد غلبهم سيغلبون في بضع سنين. Surah Rum, where basically the Romans and the Persians were the two ultimate armies of that time, okay? And the Persians were destroying the Romans and all of their allies all over the world. And the Muslims naturally allied themselves with the Christians, being the Romans, and the polytheists, the Quraysh, naturally allied themselves with the Persians, the Majus, right? And then Allah reveals an ayah that says, the Romans have been defeated. But you know what? They've been defeated in the lowest part of earth. And you know where that is? Scientifically, it's only been proven in the last 20 years, Al-Bahr al-Mayyit, the area of the Dead Sea of Ghor, is the lowest point on earth. It was said in the Quran 1400 years ago. في بضع سنين, in 3 to 9 years, this empire that constantly gets torn up and beaten is going to win. And the Muslims were mocked for that. Someone even went to Abu Bakr and said, I'll bet you that the Muslims are, that this ayah is false and that the Romans will never beat the Persians. Abu Bakr accepted the bet because it was halal, because it's not really a bet. There's no risk or chance. So all the camels that he bet, everything like that, 5 years pass, 6 years pass, the Romans are still getting destroyed, 7, 8 years. The guy's coming to Abu Bakr and saying, what's going on with your wager? You're still going to pay it, right? Yes, he's still going to pay up. 8.5 years, the Romans completely demolished the Persians. Right? They defeat the Persians for the first time in a very long time. So you study it from a historical perspective, you study it from a grammar perspective, you study it from a scientific perspective, you study the man Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam by process of elimination. You know, if you search like Quran and embryology on YouTube, you'll find embryologists that accept Islam because of the perfection of the description of embryology. So the point is, it's multifaceted. It's not just one thing. And I went through that. And what I would say is that most people that ask that question, I'm not accusing the questioner at all. I actually think the questioner is very sincere, or else they wouldn't have sent in that question. A lot of people, when they ask that question, prove this, prove that, prove this, prove that, they want it to be false. And therefore, anything you say, they've been taught to reject. And I will find a way to poke holes in your argument. And if I'm insincere, I will be able to skew everything that's thrown at me. So you have to want to be guided to the truth, and there is the emotional aspect. I dare you to ask Allah for guidance and not be guided. Right? That's what the Prophet ﷺ told Hamza radiallahu anhu. Ask Allah for guidance. Just even if you're not sure, just say, oh God, if you're there, I believe in you, guide me to the truth. I had a sister. We had a sister from Mobile, Alabama, came to New Orleans to ask questions about Islam. When I told her that, her father is an evangelical preacher. Then, subhanAllah, at night, she was seeing dreams of the Kaaba. Right? It's like clear as night and day. Ask Allah sincerely for guidance, and He will guide you. And be sincere to your quest for truth. Be sincere to your quest for truth. Don't make it just a means of debate and argument and dialogue. And really, Islam is an intellectual faith, and when you study it from a multifaceted perspective, and I know it's a very long answer, I'm sorry, you will be convinced from every single aspect, from the social aspect, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. Those who truly appreciate Allah and who are in awe of Allah and fear Allah are those who have knowledge. Watch Ahmad Didat debates. Read his books. I did that. Man, that gives you confidence in your faith. You're like, wow. You guys know the Jimmy Swaggart, Ahmad Didat debate? My dad and my father-in-law helped organize that debate. It was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I went to LSU, right? In the 80s. And they had like the Street Fighter movies, right? They had these trailers back then, like with it wasn't HD yet, but they would have like Ahmad Didat versus Jimmy Swaggart. And they would put their images on opposite sides of the screen, and then they'd have like this dramatic music, and it'd be like Monday Night Football, and they like clash and their heads blow up. It was covered by news outlets. It was crazy. It was crazy from what I remember of it, right? It was crazy, subhanAllah. And Imam Siraj, mashallah, the smooth moderator, right? Go look it up. The point is, every time the Muslims stand their ground and they know their stuff, there's a confidence that comes with that faith. You don't have to say just faith. It's intellect, it's confidence. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Jazakumullah khair.
The next question we have is for Sister Suzy Ismail. Could you please provide some tips on preserving Islamic values in non-Muslim countries, where Islam is being constantly attacked through the means of media propaganda and also by the so-called Muslims who consider themselves secular/liberals who want it to be reformed?
This question really builds upon very nicely what Sheikh Omar was just talking about. And it was funny because as you were speaking, the first image that came to my mind was also Sheikh Ahmad Didat and that debate and, sitting around it with the popcorn and my family and watching it together. So this was the first taste of somebody fighting for Islam, of somebody standing up in this country and recognizing that this is our country too. And I think many of us have our own kind of internal moderator that stops us sometimes from being vocal about our deen, from speaking up about what our deen is, and from acting upon our deen. So many times, part of the work that I do is I give diversity seminars at different corporations. And I remember I went to a Goldman Sachs, which is a very big financial corporation, and I gave a diversity seminar there, and my focus was on Muslims. And so one thing that I mentioned in the seminar was the fact that Muslims pray 5 times a day, and that it would be nice to have a clean area, a room for them to pray in. And when I was done giving my seminar, one of the vice presidents at Goldman Sachs stood up and said, "We have almost 300 Muslim employees in Goldman Sachs across the nation. Never has one of them come to me and said they need to pray. Where have they been praying?" And so a man in the audience stood up and he said, "I pray in the janitor's closet and I come out smelling like bleach every time." And subhanAllah, the vice president said, "Why didn't you just ask?" And right then and there, he dedicated one of the conference rooms and said, "This is going to be a prayer room for anybody who needs it." So I think internally, sometimes we don't speak up about our Islamic values. Sometimes we feel like this country is not back home. And that mentality that there is a back home and we belong to back home is what sometimes holds us back. Because at the end of the day, all of us who are here are Muslim Americans. Regardless of whether or not we were born here, this is our home, this is our country. And being Muslim Americans, that's not an oxymoron. I mean, that's not a paradox. They don't contradict in any way. What are our Islamic values? One of the core values of Islam is the concept of haya, of modesty. But how many of us are able to practice that concept of modesty, not just in the way we dress, but in the way we act, in the way we walk, in the way we talk? And if we're able to practice it from our actions, others around us, non-Muslims around us, should be able to see the good that this does in the dunya, the good that it does to around us, rather than the negative, rather than the drawbacks. And this is how we implement our Islamic values in a country that is not Muslim. We also have to realize that there is a hadith on Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam that says, Islam began as something strange, and it will return as something strange. So glad tidings to the strangers. So let's not be afraid to be different. Let's not be afraid to stand out with our deen in a positive way, to take those Islamic values, because those Islamic values don't make us just better Muslims, they make us better people. And no matter what country you're in, Muslim or non-Muslim, a better person is better for that country. Many times when we look at the back home, wherever back home is, whether it's in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia, wherever back home happens to be, the Islam that we see there is often diluted or mixed with a cultural kind of a construct. And so many times we see Islam practiced there in a way that has just been passed on from person to person, from generation to generation, but not in a way where if you ask somebody, why are you a Muslim? Could they answer because of the Islamic values? So many times we'll see people who are asked, why are you a Muslim? And the answer is, I was born Muslim. But here in this room today at this conference, and this is something we talk about in a lot of these sessions, that we need to have a takeaway, that you can listen to a lecture and you can nod and you can say, oh, this is great, and you can have the spiritual high for a week or two afterwards, but what are you really taking away? I would ask you, at least after this session, take away the answer to the question of why am I a Muslim? When you ask yourself that question, why am I a Muslim? What is your response? Is it just I was born Muslim? Or is it because you truly believe in that concept of Tawheed? Because La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah resonates with you? And do your research. I mean, Sheikh Omar was telling us about how much he learned about other religions. And to me, this is one of the drawbacks that I see in our communities today. When I was in college, I remember, when I took Arabic class, because for me, I was like, hey, easy A, I remember being enrolled in Arabic class and looking around, and half of the Arabic class, half of it was Arabs, and the other half were students who were studying Judaic studies, or students who were actually in the seminary studying Christianity. And most of them were non-Muslims. And then one time I decided to go to the Hebrew class, and I was doing some research, so I wanted to go. I went into the Hebrew class. Guess how many Muslims were enrolled in the Hebrew class? 0. Not a single Muslim was enrolled in the Hebrew class. I went to the class called the Bible in today's something or other, in today's side of the Bible and today's side. Guess how many Muslims were enrolled in that class? 0. Now think about the class that was called Women in Islam in college. Do you think it was all Muslims who were enrolled there? No, our Muslim students were busy being enrolled in biomedical ethics or pre-med 101 or engineering 101. And yet in that class, Women in Islam, or in that class, the Prophet Muhammad and his influence on society, those classes were filled with non-Muslims. Non-Muslims living in a non-Muslim country studying how they can poke the holes that Sheikh Omar was talking about. So we need to educate ourselves, we need to practice our Islamic values, and we need to accept that yes, we may be different in what we practice, but it's a good difference. And our difference, our actions can help influence others towards that good, inshallah, as well.
The next question is for Sister Amena Iqbal. And the next question is, how can we as Muslim youth find a balance between Islam and everyday life?
The word balance, I'm sure, comes across every one of your minds every single day. I know it does for me. Ever since I became a mother, it just sort of heightened the challenges for me personally. But we have to remember and always keep in mind that Islam, the deen that we have been blessed with, actually includes and completes everything about us and how we are supposed to conduct our everyday life. Every single aspect of our life is allowed and is actually explained, and it's sort of a balancing act that we have to do between deen and dunya. In Surah Baqarah, ayah 143, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that, and thus have we willed you to be a community of the middle way. So to achieve that balance is something that you have to sort of think about yourself to see, as soon as you wake up in the morning, what's the most important thing that you have to do. First is to pray, and everything else throughout the rest of the day, how are you going to conduct the rest of your day according to what's priority, what's mandatory according to Islam and our religion. So you should boost your knowledge first and foremost. The most practical thing is boost your knowledge about what is priority and what should be your priority as a Muslimah. Second is you should nurture your faith. You're able to develop better discipline when you engage in mandatory acts of worship. When you're praying, you kind of, or when you know that you have to pray all your 5 salah throughout the day, you can also easily adjust your studying schedule for school around that. You can revolve as many things as you want practically around your salah time, for example. I know that's the most practical thing that you can do, like starting today, starting tomorrow. Another quick mental exercise that you can start implementing is start thinking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all your conscious moments. Just think about Him. It's a simple mental exercise, and if you try to remember Him in everything that you do, starting within your heart, and every action that you do throughout the rest of the day, inshallah, you will find a peaceful balance in your life.
And just to add to Sister Amina's answer, how do you find Muslim youth find a balance between Islam and everyday life? Is that you join YM. So definitely encourage all you youth to join YM, visit the YM booth.
Where's your shirt?
I didn't have the shirt today. I didn't want to be made fun of like yesterday. The next question is for Sheikh Omar Suleiman. Why is it that sometimes our dua are not answered, and when we are in desperate need of them?
Okay. I think part of that, how many of you, just show of hands, how many of you were in the session last night, the midnight session? Okay, how many of you were awake in that session? Because it was 12 o'clock and most people were sleeping. Okay, mashallah. So some of that was answered yesterday, and understanding the whole question of evil and understanding the entire, why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does certain things, and obviously fairness and all that stuff, theodicy. Now, when it comes to dua in particular, number one, when you call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something of this dunya, and you think you need it, that's exactly why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala probably won't give it to you, because you think you need it. Again, as I said yesterday, you can't expect Allah to feed your dunya addictions. Okay? Because if your relationship with God is conditional upon Him giving you something, then it's not a real relationship in the first place. It's not a meaningful relationship. And so a lot of times, once you reduce your needs to wants, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives it to you. And that's why we find the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, the dunya chased them. Because they didn't care for it. And that's why it chased them. They didn't feel in need of it. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it to them. Now obviously there's a textbook answer to this, first and foremost, that the Prophet ﷺ said that no one makes dua except that either Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers it as he asked for it, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala perfects his dua, meaning what? Maybe there was something that you missed out, and Allah tweaks it a little bit to actually make it better for you, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala averts an evil for him. You know, sometimes be careful what you wish for, seriously. You're standing up at night and praying for that brother, for that sister. You have no idea what kind of monster that person is going to turn into 2 months into your marriage. Allah's protecting you. You're not in dust. You think you want that person, you just don't know. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala averts that evil from you. You know, it's funny, sometimes people come to me and they talk about Salat al-Istikhara, for example. Dua al-Istikhara, it just shows you how impatient we are with Allah. The most innovation in culture, or most innovation I've seen that exists within the religion is in regards to al-Istikhara. Right? People in every culture have their own istikhara thing, right? Some cultures say you say dreams, right? Some of them say that you see papers, put yes, no, papers. Some of them say you dip Quran in your water and then drink it. And I guess if you don't choke and die, then I don't know. All right, but all kinds of weird things with istikhara. We're so impatient with Allah, we've turned istikhara, which is supposed to be a dua of trust, into a decision-making, you know, into a final decision-making procedure. And in reality, istikhara is once you have made you've done your part, you've sought shura from people, you've taken advice, you've made your best, what you think is the best decision. You ask Allah to bless it if it's good, and to take it away from you if it's bad. And I've had people come to me and they're like, and they want to get married to a certain person, they want something to happen to them, or get a certain job, or get into a certain school, or a certain career, and I say, pray istikhara. They're like, no, but I don't want Allah to take it away from me. It's like, even if she's bad for me, it's okay, I'll deal with it. She's that beautiful, right? It's okay, I'll take her, even if she's bad for me, I'll take him, right? And that's a problem. Don't show impatience with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah averts an evil at times as well, or Allah saves it for you in the akhirah. And that's the best of all cases, by the way. If Allah saves your dua for you in the hereafter. You know why? Because if you asked Allah for something in this dunya and you didn't get it, trust me, on the day of judgment, you won't care. You won't be bitter and be like, while Allah's interviewing you, and you're not going to be like, but Allah, I've got a question. Like, I really wanted that car. Like, why'd you have to leave me hanging there? You'd much rather take it then. Right? And if Allah has saved your dua for the akhirah, it's because Allah really, really, really loves you. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving you something that's greater for you. But when you've made Allah answering something of this world the condition for you praying and for being for being a good Muslim and for keeping close to Him, then you're not really worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're worshiping the object for which you're calling upon Him for. Right? You can't reduce Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to insurance. It doesn't work that way. Okay? So you should be confident when you call upon Allah that if Allah doesn't give you exactly what you're asking for, He'll give you something better. He delays it for a purpose. And subhanAllah, I was giving khutbah in Houston a few months ago, and I was telling the story of Zakaria alayhi salam. And when Zakaria alayhi salam called upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his 90s and asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a son, can you imagine seeing a 90-year-old man asking Allah for a son, and he was unable to have a child when he was young, his wife was unable to have a child when she was young, and now he's asking for a son? Just think of like a grandfather or someone that that's 90 years old, right? You just pat him on the back and be like, inshallah, something will happen. You'd like laugh with them like, inshallah khair, something else will happen. We'll buy you a puppy or something, right? But Zakaria alayhi salam calls upon Allah, full confidence, absolutely no hesitation. Saying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Lam akun bi du'aika rabbi shaqiyya. You've never let me down before, oh Allah. You know how weak I am. I know how weak I am. I know how much gray hair I have. I know how weak and frail I am. I know my bones are gone. وَهَنَ الْعَظْمُ مِنِّي وَاشْتَعَلَ الرَّأْسُ شَيْبًا. but you've never let me down before. I'm confident. And you know, subhanAllah, you might think to yourself, wow, how did Allah answer Zakaria alayhi salam with that prayer? Zakaria alayhi salam had 90 years of serving Allah before he asked Allah for that son. And the reason why he was asking Allah for that son was so that he could continue to serve Allah. وَإِنِّي خِفْتُ الْمَوَالِيَ مِنْ وَرَائِي. I'm afraid of that which is coming after me. I don't see anyone capable of carrying the da'wah. He was worried about those that would come after him. So when you ask Allah for something of this world, express in your dua how you will use it for the akhirah, to seek elevation in the akhirah. Otherwise, if it's just a materialistic need, if it's just something that you want just because if it's something worldly in its nature, don't expect Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give it to you the way that you want it. But trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. SubhanAllah, after I gave that khutbah, a 90-year-old man, actually he was 89, now he's 90. 89-year-old man, he came up to me and you know, he said, you know, I have 90 years of sin. Do you think God will accept me? And he became Muslim. Oldest shahada ever that I've given. 89 years old. Right, subhanAllah. And when I was talking to him, the man, I asked him what if he needs anything. He just pointed up. He said, he's taking care of me. So amazing, subhanAllah. So trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you make dua to Him. And if you don't trust Him, then don't expect Him to feed your mistrust and to feed your dunya addictions. Wallahu ta'ala alam.
Next question for Sister Suzy Ismail. If your parents reject Islam completely, is it okay to leave them?
I think, again, this question I'm going to build right upon what Sheikh Omar just said. I like being, the person to answer the question right after him because it segues very nicely. The power of dua. Allahu yahdi man yasha. We truly never know where and when and to who the hidayah is going to come down to. And it's not up to us to give up on someone. It's not up to us to say, that's it, I'm done with this person. We all know very well the story of Sayyidina Yunus alayhi salam. We know that he tried and he tried and he gave da'wah and he gave da'wah. And then he said, that's it. Nobody's listening to me, I'm done with these people. And so he left those people. And what happened? You all know the story of Sayyidina Yunus alayhi salam, right? It's one of the early stories that our children learn. It's one of the ones that they're fascinated with, right? Sayyidina Yunus was swallowed into the belly of the whale, and it was darkness upon darkness upon darkness. And it was not until he made that dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, recognizing that he, like subhanahu inni dhalamtu nafsi, he put the burden upon himself, was he saved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that moment. So it's not up to us to give up on that da'wah. It's not up to us to say, my parents will never accept the deen. My parents are not Muslim. My parents reject Islam, so I'm done with them. Regardless of what our parents are doing, they are still our parents. We have to have that relationship with them. We have to have that silat al-rahim. We need to have that connection with our parents. When you look at Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, his father was not just an idol worshipper, he was an idol creator. He was a statue maker. Now when Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam wanted to give the da'wah, and this kind of tied back to Sheikh Omar's earlier answer to the earlier question, when Sayyidina Ibrahim went through also thinking about, can the sun be a god? Can the moon be a god? Can this be a god? And when he rejected all of those other items as gods, and he realized that there was truly La ilaha illallah, he committed to that monotheism. He wanted everyone in his community to accept Islam. He wanted his father to accept Islam. This was important to him. But it doesn't happen overnight. So what did he do? He chose to express to his father in a language his father could understand, in a language that the people of his community could understand, by action. And so when he broke the statues in the Kaaba, he hung the axe on the largest of the statues. Because he knew when the people of his town would ask him and say, how could you do this? Why did you do this? What was his response? He said, go ask the largest statue. Go ask the statue who has the axe. And what was his father's response and the people of the town? That's ridiculous. The statue doesn't speak. And in that way, Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam shared his message. He shared it through the language they understood. Did they become Muslim at that moment? Did they say La ilaha illallah? No. But it wasn't a matter of giving up on them. It was a matter of continuing. You know, I always kind of tie things back to the topic of marriage, because that's the topic that's very dear to my heart that I speak about often. But a while back, there was a young couple who were going through some difficulties. When they had both gotten married, they were both kind of not really seeking religion very strongly. They were Muslim, but they were more of like cultural Muslims. And so the young man began to have a bit of a spiritual awakening throughout his marriage. And so a few years into their marriage, he began to get upset because he would try to wake his wife up for Salat al-Fajr and she wouldn't wake up. He would invite her to pray Salat al-Maghrib with him and she wouldn't get up and pray. He would tell her, I want you to wear hijab, I want you to become more modest, and she would ignore him. So he went to a sheikh to complain and he said, I don't know what to do. Should I leave my wife? She's not practicing. She's really not at the spiritual level that I'm at, and I'm afraid she's going to drag me down. And so the sheikh responded and told him, don't do anything. Don't wake your wife up for salah. Don't tell her to wear hijab. Don't do this and this and that. Instead, be the best Muslim that you can be. Focus on your own salah. Focus on your own interactions. Focus on your own spirituality. And make dua for the hidayah of your wife. So the man went home and he prayed Salat al-Maghrib, and he didn't call his wife over to pray. And he went to sleep and he woke up the next morning, prayed Salat al-Fajr. He did not call his wife over to pray with him. Okay. A few days passed and he found one night his wife waking him up and telling him, let's get up and pray tahajjud. So the man was very surprised, but he woke up and he prayed. And then, a few more weeks passed or a few more days passed, and he finds his wife reminding him, it's time for Salat al-Maghrib. He finds his wife waking him up for Salat al-Fajr. He finds his wife wearing hijab and telling him, let's go to the masjid. So a couple of months later, he couldn't take it anymore. He had to talk to her. He said, I don't understand what happened. I've been telling you, become a better Muslim. I've been telling you, let's get more religious together. And you kept ignoring me. What made the change? And so she said to him, I saw the change in you. I saw what a better person you became when you became closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so I wanted that for myself too. Subhanallah, that's da'wah. So imagine if you are with your parents and your parents are rejecting Islam, but they see in you the beauty of Islam. They see the change in you. Keep at it. It might not take a day or two. It might not take a month or two. Think of Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam and his years of da'wah, and realize that Allahu yahdi man yasha. Don't give up. Don't despair. Know that the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is greater than we can even imagine. And keep that connection with your parents. Because Allah a'lam, you may be the tool that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will use to bring them closer to Him. And continue to make dua. The power of dua is amazing. Hold on to that dua and don't give up, inshallah.
So just following up on that question as well, in the same category for Sister Amena, the question is, as Muslim youth, we are told to be kind and gentle with our parents. But if our parents are going astray from the deen, for example, they're not praying 5 times a day because they think it's not possible for them, because of their work and sleep hours, and they think that Fajr is not compulsory. How do we address them about this issue in a gentle manner?
Well, subhanAllah, Sister Suzy just covered it. But in Surah Rahman, ayah 45, Surah Baqarah, ayah 45, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us exactly what Sister Suzy just explained. He says that seek help and patience and prayer, and truly it is hard save for the humble-minded. So those two things right then and there are the two most important things that we can do, or you, whoever has this problem at home, can apply. In this case of your parents or other family, friends, and loved ones that are not being convinced that, praying and these sort of things are important, you cannot just sit around and wait for things to happen or to change. It means you have to keep moving forward with a humble heart and mind, and you must find a way to accept your family. But at the same time, prayer means that you yourself have to do a lot of it, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help your family to become closer to Allah. And in addition, especially when dealing with adults, you will come across obstacles. They won't easily accept the certain lifestyle that you might encourage them to get upon. And the challenge here is to increase our own knowledge about why and what the issue is for them not accepting or going sort of astray. So that would be the first thing, to sort of refine your approach to asking them and getting closer to them about why they're sort of rejecting your advice. Next is try to understand your family better. Like I said, try to find out certain reasons why, they're not doing, maybe they don't know how to pray. Don't base your opinion on just judging them and simple assumptions like they're caught up in their worldly life, but really try to get to the core of it. And don't draw yourself, you definitely have to draw yourself closer, and do not go far from them. Do not distance yourself, because spending all your time and genuinely being with them will actually, inshallah, lessen your issues with them. And remember to be patient, hopeful, and consistent. In Surah Taha, ayah 132, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, and enjoin salah on your family and be patient in offering them the prayers. We ask not of you a provision, we provide for you, and the good end, paradise, is for the muttaqun, the pious. So I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides everybody and holds everybody together, inshallah.
Next question is for Sheikh Omar Suleiman. How do you reconcile modern science with Islam, specifically the science of evolution?
All right. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man. I would say that, obviously this is something that we're dealing with now more than ever. And, Sheikh Hamza Sortis, mashallah, who spoke last night, is really doing some incredible work in that field. And inshallah ta'ala, I hope all of you will take a moment to really just discover the work that he's doing in regards to evolution, in regards to all of these different humanism, science, all these different isms that are coming up. He's really doing an incredible job of tackling it, mashallah. And he has a really cool accent. Don't you guys agree? Awesome accent. So epic, mashallah. It's British Greek. It's great. Alhamdulillah. And so, I would also recommend Sheikh Yasir Qadi did his talk on evolution. And it's on YouTube. It's a very famous debate. Now, what I would say is that Islam is not incompatible with science. However, I think one of the biggest problems that we have as Muslims is that, and not as Muslims, just a lot of people in general tend to give science an air of certainty. Science does not have an air of certainty. Scientific theories, philosophies, conclusions change all the time. What is considered to be a scientific truth today will not be considered to be a scientific truth in 20 years. It'll be looked at as backwards and outdated and so on and so forth. So the point is that just because it's written in a textbook doesn't mean it's certain. Just because it's been proven, and I use that again between quotation marks, just because it's been supposedly proven does not mean that it is actual truth. And so it's important for us to also study these things objectively. And as Muslims, we do believe that what we have is certain. So what I'm saying is that when you study certain aspects of science, yes, Islam is not completely incompatible. There are definitely aspects that are entirely compatible, even with evolution, that are completely compatible with Islam. And as Muslims, we don't reject anything altogether that does not contradict the religion. So in the field of science, you can discover as much as you want to, as long as it does not contradict or conflict with anything explicitly in the text of the Quran or the Sunnah, then it's okay to accept that conclusion. It's okay to believe in that and to uphold that. The problem is that many of these scientific conclusions, specifically in the study of evolution, are leading people down a route to believe that all of this came from nothing. Okay, and that's where the problem truly lies, and obviously in the creation of Adam alayhi salam. And again, this goes back to a lack of knowledge. So for example, you have riwayat for Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu talking about 10 generations that existed between Nuh alayhi salam and Adam alayhi salam, right? Someone says, well, that's ridiculous. Mankind has existed for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Well, how long were those generations for? How long did those generations exist, those 10 generations? That's also to be taken into account, right? Because we know Nuh alayhi salam lived for 950 years. How long those 10 generations that Ibn Abbas talked about between Adam alayhi salam and Nuh alayhi salam? Was each one 100 years? So these are important questions, to ask and important things to keep in mind. So all I'm saying is just don't give it an air of certainty. It's okay to study, and at the same time, again, look into Hamza Sortis' work, look into Sheikh Yasir Qadi's work, and inshallah ta'ala there are more up and coming people. There's a book called God and the Skeptic Mind. I think it's God and the Skeptic Mind, or The Skeptic Mind in God. But inshallah ta'ala it's also a very good book to read. Sometimes Christian fundamentalist answers don't really satisfy a person's thoughts or inquiries in this regard. So it's, inshallah ta'ala, discover what's been done as far as the formulated Islamic responses to these questions. Wallahu alam. I gotta go.
Jazakallah khair. That concludes our panel session. Again, Jazakallah khair to all the panelists. Can we get a takbir for them? Takbir! 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 So we'll be starting main session 4, inshallah, in about 15 minutes or so. Just a quick announcements. Brothers on this side, sisters on this side, if you have families, the last 2 sections by the plants, that's where the families should be. So please keep that in mind. So inshallah, see you guys in 15 minutes. Assalamu alaikum.